Living with and living without electricity are very different experiences. Waking up and going to bed without electricity depends entirely on when the sun rises and when the sun sets. If you don't have time, if you come home from school late, you can't do your homework if the sun is set because you can't see the work you're working on. Luxuries like Facebook are also obviously not an option, so don't even think about that. Cooking with wood or coal instead of electricity leave larger carbon footprints, and even in a rural area, cutting down on your carbon footprint is something that we all need to worry about. Also, working in a kitchen, if you are female, in many rural areas and patriarchal societies, is a smoky and toxic place, and this can be changed with electric stoves instead of working in fire pits inside small enclosed huts that trap all the smoke and can cause health problems. Knowledge can also be limited by how much fellow members of your society or rural community know when you don't have access to things like internet or textbooks. With isolation comes a certain limit to curiosity that us as members of an industrialized society are no longer faced with. We have the internet, and we have answers to basically every question that we could think of, except for the existential, of course. We also have access to things like TED Talks, which provide new ideas and innovation that people in rural areas would not be exposed to without access to electricity and access to the internet. What is a rural area? These areas are unurbanized, they are not densely populated, and they are usually primarily agricultural, which means that they're fairly isolated from big cities, from lots of infrastructure, from things like power lines and power grids and large groups that are there provided by the government to help these small communities and to help communities in their country. Therefore, bringing mass-produced power to remote areas is extremely difficult. It's expensive because they lack the infrastructure. Therefore, transporting things like power lines and the equipment and the people to build this are extremely difficult. It's unsustainable because villages without people educated in how to maintain power lines or transformers will let everything decay eventually because they need to work on their farms, they need to make sure that their children get to school safely, they need to make sure that they feed their families. It's just not practical. And there are few residual benefits for power companies and for governments to provide to these small areas, these isolated areas, because it is so expensive and this demographic just isn't providing a lot of new profit. The United Nations Millennium Development Goals include number 1, poverty, the reduction of poverty, and the employment of women and young people in productive and decent work. Without education, this decent work is fairly limited, and education in rural areas is very difficult to find, especially when schools are without power, when homes are without power, and education is therefore made more difficult. Education is also a big goal in the United Nations because they want to ensure that by 2015, children everywhere, girls and boys alike, will be able to complete a full course of primary schooling. How is this possible when children can't even do their homework? When children can't learn outside of the classroom, and in agricultural societies, children sometimes don't even have the chance to go to class. Number 8 of the last goal that the United Nations has provided is a global partnership. A partnership between us in industrial societies and people in rural areas to address the special needs of those people, to make sure that they have the benefit of new technologies, and to make sure that they have information and a communication infrastructure so that they can start building an economy that coincides with our economy, that works with our economies, and provides them an opportunity to break ground and make ground outside of the rural villages. Rural electrification, with a focus on development of opportunity for children will have an incalculable impact on a rural village's economy and a rural village's quality of life. Focusing on children is how you focus on the future, and therefore, I'm asking you guys today to look for an opportunity not to necessarily donate, but to invest, and to invest your time and maybe even your money into eight organizations that you can start, that you can work with to that will provide small solutions to big problems like this problem. 8 organizations will buy a product to further their work. Therefore, you students can start companies where you provide maybe a carousel like Empower Playground has that charges lanterns, like the one you see here. This has lanterns at the center of it, and by children playing on it, they're actually generating electricity that are stored by lanterns so that at night children can do their homework, parents can do other work, and things can be done after sunset. This is where creativity grows, because organizations like these don't exist without creativity. They don't exist without the imagination of not only adults, but of children who just want to play on this carousel, but also end up powering their homes. Nokia's creativity led to a bicycle that actually charges cell phones. So they're charging a personal internet portal for children who want to go to school, for parents who want to go to work. They're not only getting themselves somewhere and having productive lives, they're also giving themselves an opportunity to have more information, to get a better education, to have more answers. And with this, I encourage big organizations, and I encourage you to encourage big organizations to think small, because we need to put power at the forefront of their minds, because without infrastructure, like Tim was saying, a lot of these things can't happen. Also, but without infrastructure, power can still happen. Creating things like products that will power communities is a great way to advance these communities without necessarily having to put roads in first, without having to create the infrastructure there, so that these communities can start making immediate advances, as well as helping children become the future in these communities. This does not mean to stray away from mass production of a solution, but the solution needs to have a small and more isolated community in mind. Villages can produce their own power because they have resources like the sun, like manpower, to do this. Putting rural areas and their inhabitants on the track towards sustainable economic growth and education development begins with their electrification. When these fairly isolated communities can produce their own energy, the people have electricity whenever they need it. Power grids don't cut out when there are too many people using it. These people make it when they need it. If children need light to do their homework, they can make it themselves. If they have a question that no one else in their community can answer, the internet will be there for them to consult. You are all part of their empowerment, and your creativity and your support brings those who live in rural areas in a better position to improve their lives, and you all empower children to take control of their future. Thank you.